Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for joining me today. We had some really thoughtful questions come through from educators, and I'd love to dig into a few that I think would resonate with a lot of our classrooms. So let's go ahead and get started. So, one question that we saw time and time again in the chat was around multilingual learners. Based on your experience, have you noticed any trends in what works especially well when supporting vocabulary development for multilingual learners?
Yeah, I get this question in classrooms all over. And really good vocabulary instruction is good vocabulary instruction. And so with multilingual learners, first of all, like recognizing that being a multilingual learner is kind of like having a superpower, right? Like rather than a deficit, like often students who are multilingual learners have some extra kind of metalinguistic awareness and they're developing this understanding of how languages work. And so like we can build on that and see that as a strength, as a starting point. And also then supporting their learning with all of these types of talk moves are going to support multilingual learners as well as monolingual learners. So considering like maybe helpful to show images and those kinds of things, if it's the word allows it, lends itself well to that, like a noun. I think the example was the canyon, right? That kind of thing. Anything where you're embodying, where you're demonstrating, showing, or having students do that as well. But really, all of the moves are going to be helpful for all of your learners.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I know when I was working with multilingual learners, the act it out was always a favorite in our classroom. My kids loved any opportunity to kind of get up and showcase their acting skills to act out that vocabulary word. So that's a really fun one, especially. All right, so this next one feels very real for a lot of teachers. I think as teachers, we're constantly trying to keep up with how limited our students' attention has become, and we want to keep things fun and exciting and not dry. So, in a structured vocabulary program where students are introduced to words with definitions, synonyms, and antonyms, those pages oftentimes can feel a little bit dry compared to stories or texts. So, how can teachers bring those word learning moments to life and make them more engaging for students?
Yeah, well, I'm always going to say, right, that meaningful context is so important. And so whenever possible, whether it's, we talked about words being encountered through talk and through text. And so, whenever you can have it be centered around a text or within your science or social studies or those kinds of contexts, that's really, really important. But if you're making use of a resource where kids are maybe working with some pages or some things like that, like you can still you can still build in opportunities for students to use some of these talk moves. So particularly thinking about the moves that elicit students' responses in various ways, where they get to share what they're thinking and make connections and talk with one another and share out those ideas are going to be ways that they can still meet the goal of working with those words, with synonyms and all those kinds of things, but pulling it off the page a little bit more and having building in some discussion as part of the practice that they're doing will be more engaging.
I love that idea. That's a really thoughtful response. And especially when, in so many cases, we're presenting students with so many words at once. I think even being able to implement some of those talk moves with even half of the list per se can make it that much more exciting and less dry, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And like maybe looking across, the week or several weeks and looking to see what connections you can make, right? We talked about those like building those knowledge networks or those networks of words and that interrelatedness. And so if the words aren't all meaningfully grouped based on a text or science or social studies or whatever, right? Can you help kids make those meaningful connections across the words that they've been working with? And so maybe that's something you add to the practice that they're working with.
I love that kind of building that repertoire of words. That's really cool. Cool. So our last and final question for you is around differentiation. So would any of these talk moves be especially effective or need to be adapted when working with students with, let's say, dyslexia?
Yeah. Well, again, like I really think good, strong vocabulary instruction is good, strong vocabulary instruction for all. And so just being intentional about using these talk moves and recognizing the incremental nature of word learning and the importance of repetition and, repeated exposures in multiple meaningful contexts is really important. If we think about moves that, the part of words that are often more challenging for individuals with dyslexia, maybe the print processing side of things things. And so some of the moves were like showing students the words and that orthograph, showing the orthography and helping them orthographically map it. And that may just take, some additional repetition. So just being mindful about that may be more incremental, slower to develop, maybe for some students, and maybe just like holding in memory, right, what this word is and those connections to sounds and spelling. And so maybe just more use of those, more intentional use of those moves, and maybe over more time for them to really stick. But at the end of the day, like it's the same kinds of moves that are going to be helpful.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. These were really helpful insights, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today, particularly because these talk moves connect directly to what teachers are doing and what they're navigating each and every day in their classrooms. So thanks,
Yeah.
Dr. Anderson. We really appreciate your time.